Right. Okay. Welcome back to the channel, guys. You're here with another episode of Med ABC, Acing Basic Concepts. So today we are going to talk a little bit about urology, right? We're going to go through some anatomy and we are also going to go through some physiology and histology, right? So we will look at both the male and the female urinary systems, right? So to start off from the top, guys, we know some basic structures. For example, we have our kidneys here, right? Then we have the renal pelvis followed by the ureter, right? And the ureter, it will come and enter into the bladder, right? I will draw them by these two dots. This is the area, so same in the female one, huh? This is where the ureters, right, enter into the bladder, right? And then we have the bladder. Here we have cut across the bladder, right? So that we can see both the inside and the outside. And then we have some other structures, right? One, this black bar, right? This black bar here. This is what we call the urogenital diaphragm, right? We'll take a look at that as well. Here we have the urethra, right? The male and the female urethra. Now, one of the first differences you all can see, guys, between the male and the female urinary system is the length of the urethra. So if we go to specifics, right, the male urethra is about 18 to 20 centimeters, whereas the female urethra is only about 3 to 5 centimeters. Now, this is important. Why? Later we will talk about in our discussion about urinary tract infections, right? This difference in length is one of the primary reasons why females are affected more in terms of UTIs, right? We'll talk about that later. Now, the next concept I want to tell you all, guys, if we draw a line across like this, right? Something like this. Okay. What have I done here? I have basically divided the urinary tracts into two, both male and female. Here, guys, every structure which is above the level of the bladder, right? All the structures above the level of the bladder, we call it the upper urinary tract, right? And all the structures below, bladder and below, right? Bladder and below, we call it the lower urinary tract. Now, what's important about this? When we have infections, that is how we classify it. We call it an upper urinary tract infection. You all might have heard the term pyelonephritis. It's actually a medical emergency. We'll talk about that later. And then we have lower urinary tract infections, right? Okay. Then, coming further down, let's get to the bladder, right? So we've taken a cross section out here so we can see both the outside and the inside. Now, if you all can see, the bladder is made up of this layer of muscle, right? Both male and female. We call this the detrusor muscle. Now, the detrusor muscle, guys, this is a smooth muscle, right? This is a smooth muscle. So just like in the gastrointestinal tract, when we have a smooth muscle, it is not under our voluntary control, right? So that is very important to know, right? Then, inside the bladder, right? You all can see I've drawn these curly sort of lines. What are these, guys? This is to signify that in the inner side of the bladder epithelium, right, we have these fold-like structures. These are like folds, right? This is what you call rugae, right? Rugae. Okay, rugae. Now, this is there both in male and female bladder, right? What is the importance of having this rugae, guys, right? The importance is the rugae, when they flatten, they allow more volume, more space. So what does that do? As the bladder is filling up with urine, this rugae helps the bladder mucosa to stretch, right? It helps the bladder mucosa to stretch to accommodate a large volume of urine, right? That is for the storage function, right? Then you all can see, guys, now we drew this, the entry point of the orifice of the ureter, where the ureter comes and enters the bladder. Here, there's an importance, guys. Later, we'll look at a picture as well. I will show you all towards the end of this class. The ureter comes and connects to the bladder at an oblique angle, right? I will show you all a picture so that you all get a better idea. The next important thing to understand here is, guys, now you all can see there is an area here, this triangular area, right? The triangular area. This area doesn't seem to have any rugae, right? Same here. This area, right? This area doesn't have any rugae. It is like an inverted triangle, right? Look at this, guys. What is this area encompassed by, right? So we have the two entry points of the ureter, and we have this entrance point of the urethra, the starting point of the urethra, right? This one right here, right? And here as well. So these 3 points, they form sort of like an inverted triangle, right? And this area does not have any rugae, and we call it the trigone of the bladder. The trigone of the bladder. Okay, the trigone of the bladder. Now, so what is the trigone of the bladder bordered by? So we have the 2 entry points of the ureter, as well as, right, we have the neck of the bladder. We call this area the neck of the bladder, where the bladder ends and the urethra begins. We call this the neck of the bladder, right? Bladder neck, right? Bladder neck. Now, look at this, guys. What is the important point about this trigone? It doesn't have rugae. What is the importance of it not having rugae, right? You all notice, guys, when there is no rugae, can the bladder stretch as much? No. In fact, the trigone is one of the last areas to start stretching as the bladder fills up with more and more urine, right? Then, what is the other important point? The trigone also contains a lot of stretch receptors. So what are the 2 points? The trigone is the last area to start stretching as the bladder is filling with urine. Also, the trigone contains a large number of stretch receptors. What do you think the function is, guys, of this trigone region? One of the major functions is this trigone. Soon as it is starting to stretch, it will not stretch at all compared to the detrusor muscles, the rugae areas. But the moment it stretches a little bit, it's going to immediately send impulses, right? That is going to tell the individual, okay, now I've got to urinate, right? Okay. So that is one of the primary functions of the trigone. Now, there is also a disadvantage related to this trigone, guys, since it does not have the rugae. This area is very smooth and very susceptible to infection, specifically from bacterial species. So we talk about this when we talk about cystitis, right? Infection here, right? Okay. Then the next concept I want you all to understand, guys, here, if we take a look at the neck of the bladder region, guys, it is encompassed by a continuation of our smooth muscle. Now, if I just draw it out for us to get a better picture, if this is the urethra, this initial portion of the urethra, we call it the neck of the bladder, where the bladder ends and the urethra begins, right? This portion is covered, right, or is encompassed by a continuation of this detrusor muscle. It is encompassed. This initial portion is encompassed, right? Because of that, because this muscle is surrounding this initial portion, right, or the neck of the bladder, there is a sphincter-like function there. Right? So what is the important point here? We said that the detrusor muscle is made up of smooth muscle cells. Therefore, it is not under our voluntary control. So what do you think about this sphincter? This sphincter is also not under our voluntary control. What is this sphincter, guys? We call this the internal urethral sphincter. The internal urethral sphincter is not under our voluntary control, right? Then, as we come down, right, there are a few differences in the male structure, guys. You all can see here, right? This is our prostate. And connected to that, here we have the seminal vesicles, right? The prostate actually, guys, it wraps around the urethra, right? This is why in conditions like benign prostatic hyperplasia, there's going to be a difficulty in urination, right? Initiating the stream. We'll talk about those later, right? In the female structure, we do not have a prostate. We know that, right? Then coming to this black structure that we initially, this black bar-like structure, right? What is this? This is our urogenital diaphragm. Now, the urogenital diaphragm is composed of multiple muscles, guys, multiple different muscles, right? We don't need to go into the in-depth anatomy of that. But what I want you all to know, this is what forms our pelvic floor. Now, if you all can see, I've drawn some important muscles that we need to know here. I've drawn it in green, right? These muscles, guys, form what we call the external urethral sphincter. External urethral sphincter. So we have the internal urethral sphincter here at the neck of the bladder, which is formed by a continuation of the detrusor muscle. Then here outside within the urogenital diaphragm, we have the external urethral sphincter. Now, the external urethral sphincter, guys, it is made up of skeletal muscle. What does that tell us? This external urethral sphincter is under our voluntary control, right? So when we want to initiate the stream, we have a voluntary control. When we want to stop midstream, if we want to stop urinating, we still can using this external urethral sphincter. Now, there is a reflex pathway as well. Once you start urination, right, the continued opening of this sphincter, how it is kept open, that is by a reflex mechanism. We'll talk about that later, right? But for now, the basic I want you all to understand is the external urethral sphincter is made up of skeletal muscle and is under our voluntary control, right? Then, here, guys, just for you all to know, if you all are curious, just know that this external urethral sphincter in females is actually a little bit different to that of the males, right? It is actually made up of 3 muscles, and there is some muscles that are connecting around the vagina as well, right? So that is a little bit of extra points for you. Right. Then, next, just to mention a few points about the physiology, guys. Now, our bladder, it has a storage function, right? It is where the urine is stored until it can be sent out of the body. A normal bladder, guys, right? It can hold about 600 milliliters of urine, about 600 milliliters of urine. Now, this can slightly vary in males and females. Males have a little bit of a larger capacity, around 700 ml, where females have only about 500 to 550, just a slight difference. This is basically due to the anatomical difference in the positioning. I will show you all a side view, right? A side view of these urinary systems where we can see the uterus is lying just above, right? Above the bladder in females, right? Therefore, the expansion is a little bit less, right? Apart from that, generally, roughly, if we say around 600 ml of urine can be stored. Now, what is the important point here, guys? There are certain pathologic conditions where there is urinary retention. In these conditions, right, sometimes it can even exceed 1 liter, sometimes 1.5 liter, right? Generally, guys, we say if the urinary bladder is being filled up, and urine is not allowed to pass, right? And it goes beyond 1.5 liters. Here, there is a very high chance of bladder rupture, right? We'll talk about this in surgical emergencies as well, right? Then the next important point is, now we said around 600 ml can be stored. All those 600 ml can be stored, guys, by around 250 to 300 ml. When the bladder reaches this area, right, this trigone stretch receptors start sending signals saying, okay, now it's time for you to urinate, right? So by around 250 to 300 ml, a normal individual, right, starts feeling the need to urinate. Okay, those are some physiological things for you all to know, right? Then, guys, we will take a look, right, at some microscopic structures, at some histology with regards to this urinary system, what we call the urothelium. Okay, right. So I hope you guys can see my screen here, right? So I have put some images for you all. Let's first take a look at this, guys. Right. So this is a side view. This is a side view that I was talking about. Now here, one of the important things I want you all to see first, right, is that in the female urinary system, you all can see here, this is the bladder. This right there is the bladder. And just above the bladder, guys, we have the uterus, right? We have the uterus. So this is why there is a slight difference in capacity, right? In the total volume, right? When we compare it to a male, right? Then the other important point I want you all to see here is, guys, when we talk specifically about urinary tract infections, one of the main mechanisms is something we call the ascending infection, right? That is, bacteria from outside travels all through the urethra and starts going upwards, ascending. Now, one of the primary areas that they acquire this bacteria is from our anal canal, guys, from our anal canal. Now, what is the significance here between males and females? You all can see from the opening of the anal canal, right? For the males, right, for the pathogen to ascend, right, it has to go all this way, come all this way, and finally it will reach the orifice of the urethra, right? The orifice of the urethra. So this is a long pathway. It's a longer pathway. Whereas in females, guys, if you take a look, right, here is the opening of the anal canal, right? And here, this is the only distance that this pathogen needs to travel, right? So this is yet another reason, apart from the shorter length of the urethra, this is another reason why females are affected more, right? Okay, then let's come to the histology, guys. Now here, I have put an image of what we call the urothelium. What is this urothelium, guys? this is the epithelium of the bladder as well as the proximal urethra, right? Remember we drew the structures before. So we have the bladder, something like this, right? And we have the neck of the bladder and finally the urethra, right? So this initial portion, all the epithelium in this initial portion, right, is what we call the urothelium, right? Now, if you look at the urothelium, guys, the urothelium, firstly, if you look at the cell layers right here, this is what we call a transitional epithelium, guys. It is actually what, exactly speaking, right? Accurately speaking, this is a stratified squamous epithelium. Why do we say that? Here we see multiple cell types, guys. For example, if you all see these basal cells, these guys, these are very more cuboidal in shape. These are cuboidal cells, right? Then somewhere here around the middle zones, we have more columnar cells, So there are multiple, these are multiple layers. That's why we call it a stratified layer, right? It is a stratified squamous epithelium, right? Then guys, here on the top right here, you all can see these hair-like structures. These are what we call, guys, GAG, glycosaminoglycans, right? So this is a glycosaminoglycan layer, right? GAG layer, right? Then apart from that, guys, here, this is the lamina propria, right? We have some interstitial cells, right? Not very important. Here, this is the detrusor muscle layer, right? Very important structure, detrusor muscle layer, right? So if we take a closer look, guys, right? Specifically this area, right? If we take a closer look, right? I've zoomed it in and I've taken it here. So here at the very bottom, we have the basal layer. These are cuboidal cells. Then we have the intermediate layer, right? These are more columnar. And on the very top, guys, on the very top, we have what we call these umbrella cells. Now, those glycosaminoglycans were here on this umbrella cells, right? Umbrella cells. Okay, these are the glycosaminoglycans. Now, what is the importance of this? Just like the name suggests, guys, right? You all can draw sort of like an umbrella, right? Something like that. Yeah, it's not exactly what the umbrella cells look like, but just to get familiar with this, right? The umbrella cells are like that, and then we have the GAG or the glycosaminoglycan layer like this on the top. What is the function of this? Now, if we take a cross section of the urinary tract, right? Specifically, the inner aspects of the bladder as well as the proximal urethra, this is what it's going to look like. The umbrella cell layer is at the very top. These are the umbrellas, right? Umbrellas. Okay. And then we have the other layers of the cells. We have the cuboidal cells, the columnar cells. And at the very top in this red color, I will draw, these are our glycosaminoglycans. So you all can see the glycosaminoglycans, they are facing the lumen. They are facing the luminal side, right? What does this do? Who is flowing in this lumen, guys? Our urine. Our urine is flowing along this lumen, right? So what does this glycosaminoglycan layer together with these umbrella cells do? They prevent the direct contact of the urine with the urothelium, right? They prevent direct contact of the urine with urothelium. What is the importance of this? You all know our urine is highly concentrated and it contains multiple toxic waste products, right? So we do not want these waste products coming and traveling along, right? Or touching along our urothelium layers, right? Because they can cause cellular injury, right? Then guys, the other important point, if you all remember when we were discussing the anatomy, I mentioned that the ureters, they come and enter the bladder at an oblique angle. Now here in this picture, you all can see this very clearly, right? The ureter is coming at an oblique angle, right? And it is entering the bladder. What is the importance of this, right? Here, guys, if you all remember, the ureters enter the bladder at the trigone area, You all know the trigone area does not support stretch, right? Because it does not have any rugae. What is the importance here, guys? As urine starts filling, now I will draw it in black, as urine starts filling, right? As urine starts filling like this, right? Okay, this urine is going to start pushing, right? It's going to start pushing just like that against this obliquely entering ureter. What does this do, guys? This will help close, right? The ureter will close, right? The entrance of the ureter will close, right? As the bladder is filling up, it starts pushing against the entrance orifice of this obliquely entering ureter, and therefore the orifice or the entrance point of the ureter will close, right? Why is this important for us, guys? What is the importance here? This prevents backflow of urine, right? It prevents backflow of urine back along the ureter to the kidneys, right? Okay, so those are a few important points, some basics in urology that I want you all to understand, right? So I hope today's class was clear, guys. I hope you guys understood all the content, right? That's it for today's session. All right, drop a like, hit the subscribe button, and catch you guys in the next one.